Hello everyone, welcome to Think Computer YouTube channel. In this video we will learn about IP address. So what is an IP address? How an IP address is assigned? Why we need an IP address? Types of IP addresses? Structure of an IP address? IPv4 and IPv6 and how to know your IP address. These are the topics which I will be explaining in this video. So what is an IP address? IP stands for Internet Protocol. IP address is an unique address that is assigned to each device connected to any network. That can be a desktop, laptop, printer, smartphone, smart TV or any other electronic device. So we can say that if you have a device which is capable of connecting to the internet, then it has been assigned an IP address. So how an IP address is assigned? Well, as soon as you connect to the internet, your internet service provider, also known as ISP, assigns an IP address to your device. In India, in case of mobile network, it's Jio, Airtel, BSNL or Vodafone Idea. In case of broadband connection, it can be BSNL, Jio Fiber, etc. So why we need an IP address? Well, suppose two devices need to communicate with each other on the internet. They need an identification using which they can connect to each other, they can reach to each other. So in order to identify a device on the internet, an IP address is used. Every IP address is unique and no two devices can have the same IP address at the same time. Types of IP addresses. So IP addresses can be static or dynamic. If you are using a private internet connection, then most probably you have been assigned a dynamic IP address, but in case of large organizations, they use static IP addresses which does not change. Then the router itself assigns private IP addresses inside of the local network. IP address is a logical address which is assigned by the internet service provider. So ISP is given IP addresses in blocks by the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, IANA, which is actually an organization that oversees the global IP address allocation. Structure of an IP address. So let's see the basic structure of any IP address. So this is an example of IPv4 address. Okay, so here each XXX can be between 0 to 255. So each of these parts is stored in 8 bits. The maximum number of possible combinations for each group of number is 256. So that means each group here can have any value from the range of 0 to 255. Each IP address can be divided into two parts, the network part and the host part. So the network part is representing the class of the IP address. There are 5 classes actually, class A, B, C, D, E, and that is used by the network. And the host part, that is representing the unique ID of the device in the network. Take an example, 192.168.15.25. Here 192.168.15, that is the network part and it represents the network, whereas the number 25 represents the unique ID of the device in the network. So network part and the host part, means the device part, that is different in different classes. Let's talk about IPv4 and IPv6. So IPv4 is the version 4 of the Internet Protocol address and IPv6 is the version 6. The difference between IPv4 and IPv6 addresses is that IPv6 addresses are longer and formatted differently. So there are more possible unique IPv6 address configurations. Okay, so IPv4 is a 32-bit system and it uses a string of numbers separated by dots or parents, whereas IPv6 is a 128-bit system and it uses alphanumeric sequences separated by colons. So IPv4 can theoretically store more than 4 billion addresses. So 4 billion devices can have the IP address, which is IPv4, whereas IPv6 is capable of storing 340 trillion cube addresses. So some examples are given here. This is example of IPv4, this is example of IPv6. So there are many websites which can actually show your IP address. You can simply type my IP address in the search box of your web browser and it will take you to many websites which will show your IP address. One such website is whatismyipaddress.com. If you are using a Windows computer, then you can open the command prompt, that is CMD, and just type ipconfig and know your public IP address. In Android devices, you can go to the settings app, and in the about phone there is status option. You can go to the status and IP address is given over there. In Mac OS, you can go to the internet and wireless option, and there is Ethernet option to view IP address.